So these documentaries that are coming out then saying all of the reef is turning white and it's man's fault and climate change and water temperatures and water levels, are they just selecting certain parts and presenting that to us as the whole thing then? Is that what's... they're cherry picking little bits of it?
They're definitely cherry picking, but it goes beyond that as well.
Because I'd expect, right, if you've done 5,000 dives in 30 years... I would expect you to say to me, I've been diving this spot for 30 years, and in 30 years we've seen a gradual slow decline and it's getting harder and harder to find good reef to take my visitors to, but you're not saying that.
In fact, the opposite.
Right.
The opposite. So 28 years ago, 28 years ago, we started going further out. So 30 years ago, remember, diving in Australia or anywhere in the world only really got into a commercial operation where you've got tourists coming out in the 80s.
Yeah.
So this was only 5 or 6 years before I got to Australia and started diving the reef. So it was still in its infancy, you know. It might have been going, tourism might have been going 6 or 10 years maybe out to the reef, and they're only going to the inner reefs or the reefs which are closest to shore, you know,
because you would for money,
convenience, etc.
less fuel,
less seasickness, all that kind of stuff. So then when we got better boats, we'd go further afield. Plus also we just tended to find that the better diving was out towards the Coral Sea, further east of the mainland of Australia, out towards the deeper water, and on the outer edge of the Barrier Reef, those reefs tended to be really amazing. Plus the visibility, the clarity of the water was cleaner. You could see further underwater, what we call the visibility. And so we were going out that way. And you know, there's one reef we went to on a weekly basis for a few days every week, which was called Elizabeth Reef, which was exceptional. It was just stunning. Now 30 years later, it's better.
Yeah, but it should all be gone, and it should all be dead.
Now what's really interesting about that one reef there is zoned for fishing, so you can fish there, you can commercial fish there, there's no mooring, so you can drop your anchor there. And so you'd think, because there's no rules in that area, that it'd be trashed.
There'd be no fish there.
It's better. It's better than it ever was. There's more fish life there. The coral is... Put it like this, you know, we quite often take my yacht out there, and we'll sit out there for 5 days on Elizabeth Reef. And we'll do 4, 5, 6 dives a day, me and a bunch of mates. And there's a coral garden, we call it the spine because it runs along the back of the main reef, and it goes for about 2 miles, and it is the most pristine coral garden. It's absolutely stunning, it really is, and you can't find an imperfection in it.
Yeah.
So that's 60 mile offshore. The inner reefs are 32, 35 miles offshore, and then the fringing reefs around the Whitsunday Islands are 16 miles offshore, roughly. So if it was anything to do with what the media is saying, which is climate change, and I think it's important to address, what do they actually mean by climate change? Does the climate change? Well, yeah, it changes every minute in England.
All the time.
It's changing,
and the climate
all the time.
The climate has never not been changing. It's always been changing.
Yeah, since before we were on this planet.
They, from a PR point of view, though, they switched, didn't they? Because it used to be global warming.
Yeah.
But then they realised it wasn't getting hotter.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get away with that. So now it's changed to climate change. But climate change should mean more sun, and the sun is burning the coral because there's less sea. But the sea levels aren't changing either. So
that's another topic we can address if we've got time. We can address that one because I've got evidence on that as well.
Or the fact that the sea levels haven't changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I'll go to any harbour in Britain and ask them what year they built it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you can see the coral reef. You know, as I say, 30 years on a very, very low tide, and we've got the tide times and the heights of the times are logged in books every day of the year, and they print these for many, many years to come, and we've got all the records of the past. And so a certain time of year, a certain month, we know what level the water will be, and on a very, very, very low tide, the reef comes out of the water. Yeah. So it's in bare sunlight. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but the reef has its own sunblock. Coral has its own sunblock. If you touch it with your fingers, it's like a soft jelly, and that's a sunblock. It protects it. They reckon it's like 300 factor. You know. Yeah. So when the reef comes out of the water on a low tide, it's protected itself from the sunlight, and that reef, in theory, if the water levels were rising, the reef wouldn't be coming out of the water now. No. Because at the most, you'll see the reef come out of the water maybe by a foot, maybe 300 millimetres. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. All right. Occasionally, you might see a bit more, but never more than 300 millimetres. And that's not the whole reef either. And it depends. It'd have to be a really, really low tide to do that. But that hasn't changed. Yeah. So if it had changed, then those... the lowest of low tides, the reef wouldn't be out of the water, but it still is out of the water exactly the same as what it was 30 years ago. Yeah. So going back to all the different patches of reef and how the reef's looking. So the reef we used to dive many, many years ago is called Bait Reef. It's 32 miles offshore. It's the nearest reef to Airlie Beach, apart from the fringing reefs around the islands. And that got hit by a cyclone 7 years ago. Smashed it to smithereens. Yeah. Absolutely trashed it.
Because what kind of depth of water is that?
So the top of the reef would, on a mid-tide, would be, you know, there might be a metre of water on top of it. Yeah. 3 or 4 feet, something like that.
Enough to get smashed by a cyclone, basically. It's not deep enough to be protected from a big storm.
No way. Yeah. But even the coral down at 10 metres got smashed. Yeah. On the one face, the southeastern face, which we used to dive a lot, which was stunning, beautiful coral garden, the coral went down to 20 metres there, smashed to bits. Yeah. By one cyclone, which lasted 24 hours. Yeah. So you go back there now, you can start seeing some coral regrowth, but a lot of algae covered the reef there, and that suffocates the reef, the coral, so it can't grow. So that reef, you can't say that that's anything to do with bleaching. Some people might argue, well, the cyclone only came because of climate change. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, we've got all the facts, and anybody can Google all this, and I love fact checking. Yeah. But not fact lying. You know, just check it out and just be honest and open with ourselves. Why can't we just do that? Why can't we just be good human beings, and instead of going to a narrative all the time, ask the question why? We got to be back like we were when we were kids, you know? When we were kids, we're always like, why mummy, why daddy, why mummy, why daddy? And then we go to school, get indoctrinated, and we never ask the question why anymore.
We're not taught to question, the kids are not taught to question anything. So you've got the whole, the coral is dying. Well, why don't we go take a look? Oh no, you don't need to do that. I've just told you the coral is dying. But you're in the dive industry and you're not complaining. I assume all the other boats that are going out there, you know, the dive industry in Australia isn't on its arse because there's no coral left, basically.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
It should be, based on what we're hearing.
Yeah. And we can speculate, and we shouldn't speculate really, but if we were to, I often ask the question, well, why are they saying this? Yeah. Why are they saying, well, the reef's dead? Is it because they don't want people to come to the reef? Is it because they want to destroy the tourist industry? Or is it a fear factor? You better come here quickly and check out the coral reef before it's all gone.
Well, that works from a marketing point of view, but then you guys would be pushing that, wouldn't you? You'd be going out there saying, oh, you haven't got long.
Absolutely.
Come and see the reef.
Yeah.
Or is it just all part of an agenda that plays into control? Because if they make us believe that we're ruining the planet, then they find excuses to lock us down, because we'll believe that the lockdowns are worthwhile to save the environment.
And of course, you know, they can say, right, well, we need to put all this money into saving the reef. Okay, yeah, cool, well done. So as a human being who's not a coral polyp, who's not a zooxanthellae, a human being, you think that you're more intelligent than the greatest living thing on the planet, which has been here longer than anything else.
I mean, you do the reef a disservice, don't you, by saying the water temperatures are changing and the sun is going to get sunburnt, but then at the same time we're teaching evolution, and that things will, as they grow and develop through natural selection, they work out what they need for the environment that's around them. And the coral has spent millions of years developing, but only now it's realizing that a million years ago it should have started developing sunblock.
Their hypocrisy knows no bounds.
Yeah.
It's a great subject, isn't it? And a confusing one if we think we can make the illogical logical. So what a lot of these people are saying is so illogical, and all I do is I do what my grandmother used to say to me: the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
Right, the proof is when I dive down underwater, that reef is beautiful. It's stunning. The Australian Institute of Marine Science put out a report about 18 months ago, which said that the reef is better than it's been for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And the government ignored that. I understand the Australian Institute of Marine Science are kind of connected to the government, but the government ignored it. The media ignored it. And the people ignored it.
Well, the difficulty is, right, I live in Worcester in England, and it's grey all the time. And if you tell me the coral reef is dying, I've got no way of proving it either which way, because it's halfway around the world. And I think that's what they do. They use these big iconic locations and these big iconic nature things like the coral reefs and the polar bears, and you know, all of these, and then you've got the glaciers, but we can't prove any of it because we just have to go with what we're told, because it's not easy for me to go, oh, let me just go count the polar bears, let me just go check out that glacier, let me go check out the barrier reef. But then when you've got people that work in these locations every day, they're going, hold on a minute, it all looks great to us.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? That the biggest fact they come up with that there's climate change is showing you a 2-second video of a polar bear floating on a piece of ice and saying that all the ice is disappearing. But polar bears have been traveling on ice to get across waters, open waters, for thousands of years. Now all of a sudden, oh, that's climate change, poor little polar bear. It's ridiculous. That's just a video, but there's no facts based behind that. So what I say to people, don't believe me.
Yeah.
Go and take a trip to the Great Barrier Reef. If you can't afford to go to the Great Barrier Reef, or you don't want to go to the Great Barrier Reef, or you don't have the time to go to the Great Barrier Reef, don't believe the narrative. Simply take it off your list of things to talk about.
Yeah.
Or go and find the truth.
Yeah.
And this is what people are doing. It's amazing what people are doing right now. They're going there, just getting any random opinion, and if it suits their narrative, they'll run with that opinion. And then some people are very kind of when they speak, they're good orators. They speak with authority, even if it's absolute garbage.
Yeah.
And we've had some prime ministers like that. We've had some presidents like that who speak with incredible oratory skills, but it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And we've got this happening with things around the world now, but because my passion is the ocean, as you know, we've got Ocean Home and we clean up plastics, etc. And I just love to see the truth. Now, if the reef was dying, and we could do something about it, I'd be the first one to say, right, let's do this. The reason why I started Ocean Home,
as would the whole of the diving industry in Australia.
absolutely, yeah,
Because it's your business.
Yeah. You know, we started Ocean Home so that we could go out and do something, because we saw that plastics in the ocean was polluting the ocean from the tiny coral polyps. The polyps will ingest those microplastics,
Yeah.
to the biggest creatures in the ocean, the whales and the whale sharks,
Yeah.
etc. So we knew that we had to do something about it. But when it comes to the reef being dead, I could fall into that narrative and go, oh yeah, give me some money. Give me some money so that I can do some good here.
Yeah, and the other side of that is as well, if you go with the narrative, oh, the reef is dying, right? You could go, let's raise money and let's stop people visiting the reef. Okay, so we're putting restrictions on people. But if you take the narrative, the reef is dying and we think it could be to do with microplastics, suddenly you've got to start looking at big business. Well, why is big business making X amount of plastic per year? What can we do about that? But nobody ever wants to stop big businesses doing things.
No, exactly.
They always want to stop me and you doing things. So the reef's dying, so Ian and Geoff can't go visit the reef. The reef is dying, but we're not going to do anything about the fact that Coca-Cola makes more plastic than anyone, and that company is huge and operates in every country. But we'll leave them to it, but we're not allowed to go out on the boat.
And of course, it's our fault where all these plastics are in the world. But
you used too much suntan lotion going in the sea all those years. That's what it was.
That's what it was.
You bleached the coral.
Yeah.
Wasn't anything to do with the Coca-Cola company.
Nothing at all, mate. So yeah, here we go. And I think it's really important for people to get it, that the fact is the reef is not dead. Less than 1% of any particular area we've dived, which is only a fraction of the reef. Over the last 50 years, we've only dived about 1 to 2% of all the reefs on the Barrier Reef. There's over 3,000 reefs. We've only dived between 300 and 600 of those reefs. It's hard to give an exact figure because different boats go different places. So it's not fair to just go the whole thing's just dead and bleached. And even the reefs where we do dive a lot, it's a tiny, there's little patches of bleaching. So that makes me think. Now, I've got no evidence of this, so it just makes me think. And people can think whatever they want. I'm not here to tell people how to think. But if it was let's get specific what they're saying climate change is. Man-made CO2 creating climate change, which is killing the reef. That's what they don't say that, but that's what they're trying to say.
That's the headline.
Because they're conveniently forgetting to tell people the whole sentence. They just say climate change, when let's look at the whole sentence. Man-made CO2 is creating global climate change, which is killing the Great Barrier Reef. Okay, well, if that was the case, then the whole reef from top to bottom, 2,000 kilometres, if there was an increase in temperature, which the coral couldn't handle, then the whole reef would be bleached. Yeah,
you'd be seeing a general decline on a huge scale.
Absolutely. Whereas it's not. It just happens randomly at different times of the year in different spots. What I have noticed is that these spots seem to be where big rivers come out into the ocean. Now, we've got different industries along those rivers pumping phosphates and nitrates and different chemicals into those rivers, which then gets pushed out to the ocean, onto the reef, which could freak out the zooxanthellae, which says, I'm out of here, you're stressing me out. If it was climate change, you don't get a little patch of climate change just here, it's the whole area. And once again, I repeat myself from earlier, the temperature changes dramatically from one end of the reef to the other, but we've got the same coral up and down the reef. So 2,000 kilometres apart, you've got similar coral down south as you have to up north. There are some differences, but it's very similar. Also, you'd have these little patches. You've got these little patches here and there Well, that's not consistent with the temperature change. And we've got temperature change on a daily basis as well, depending on the currents and depending on the wind. So all these things are variable, but what is consistent is for the last 50 years, or probably more, because Australia is obviously a younger country with industry, etc., maybe 80 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 100 years, possibly. We've got a lot of chemicals coming off the land from industry going into the reefs.
Especially if you've got farming chemicals, herbicides and all that sort of stuff going into the rivers. Well, the coral's plants, isn't it? So if you've got farming runoff with stuff that they are putting on the land to stop pests, and we know all this stuff is harmful, it's going to then make sense that if that goes into the water and it goes near the reef, it's going to impact the reef.
100%, absolutely. And it's just, I don't believe in coincidences, but it is quite coincidental that these places where we see odd patches of so-called bleaching are very, very near to the industries. Yeah. That's all I can, that's just an observation. And no one has done these studies. No one has. You've got Australian Institute of Marine Science. I like those guys. They're pretty honest. They put out some good work, and everybody ignores them. Then you've got the University of Queensland. I know some of the scientists there. I've worked with them. Lovely people, but they are wholly and solely focused on their little specific area of science. Yeah. And they're not interested in what's over there 5 meters away.
Because the other thing is, someone gives you a brief and therefore a load of money and says, can you go out and show me that the coral's declining? You'll go out and show them that the coral's declining. What you won't do is go back to them and say, actually, we went and did the study, but what we found was, yes, the coral is declining, but only in the areas where there's industrial runoff from farms or businesses, because that's not going to fit the agenda of the person that provided you the money to do the study. So the anecdotal evidence from people who work within, say, diving is more important than the scientific evidence, because the scientific evidence has always got a funder.
100%. This is really interesting. So I've got some interesting stories about just experiences, and these are first-hand experiences from me. So this isn't word of mouth. This is first-hand experiences from me. So 2 or 3 years ago, I took some old friends way out to Elizabeth Reef, 60 miles offshore, and a married couple. He is the most experienced dive instructor in the world. Yeah, he's taught more instructors to dive to become instructors than anyone else in the world. He's a good friend of mine. We worked together back in the 90s. And a legend in the industry. And him and his wife, she's also a diving instructor. Now, he was doing, most of his teaching was on the inner reefs or around the islands. There's a massive pontoon which 350 people a day go out to and play around on the reef. Imagine 350 people a day walking across a golf course. What would that golf course be like, even if you had the best groundsman in the world? Yeah, you're going to know about it. It's going to be trashed. But this patch of reef, they put a platform out there, 350 people every single day with sunblock on, which poisons the reef. Oh, but we'll sell you this non-toxic sunblock. Yeah, sure. And so my mate would go out to them most of the time, and eventually that part of the reef gets a bit ugly, and they move the pontoon up a couple of miles away to make it look all good again. So his experience of diving those reefs was limited because his work didn't allow him to be out on these outer reefs, etc.
On the further reaches.
So anyway, for quite a few years, we used to do some coral reef stuff as well together, volunteer stuff for an organisation called the Order of the Underwater Coral Heroes, where we'd go and inspect corals. This was 20, 30 years ago. And we'd put these pyramids around the fringing reefs of the islands so that people wouldn't anchor on top of the reef. So we did all that stuff. So he's a great guy. But I don't know, 10 years ago, he started saying that the reef was dead, and climate change and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I need to get him out to the reef. Because I know he hasn't been out there for 20 years, even though he's one of the most experienced instructors in the world.
Yeah.
So this is really important. You might have a degree or something, or some experience in something, but if you haven't actually been visiting that spot, if you haven't actually been experiencing it in the day, in the now, then you can't comment on it. So anyway, I took him and his wife out and a few mates, and we went out to Elizabeth Reef for 5 days. Their first dive, they came up after this first dive, took their regulators out their mouth and went, "The reef is alive!"
Yeah.
And it was because they just experienced it, they saw it. So even great people like that can have the wrong opinion if they're not experiencing the truth. Just 2 months ago, there's a TV organisation called Channel 9 in Australia, and they wanted to do an expose of coral bleaching on the reef. So they went out on a boat I know very, very well. In fact, I drive this boat sometimes, so I know the reefs around there. I know the boat. They didn't go out to the outer reef. They didn't go onto the reef proper. They went to the fringing reefs around the islands. There wasn't any diving instructors on board. Now, the diving instructors are the ones who know the reef. Why? Yeah. They're doing it. They're underwater all the time. You can't tell if coral is bleached from standing on the surface. You have to get under the water to see it, because there's different things. It might be a patch of white sand. It might be just white reef, which you do get. It might have been affected by a crown of thorns starfish, which is another subject. They can eat themselves. They eat the size of themselves in one day. So these starfish are huge things, the size of a dustbin lid, and they can eat all those polyps in one sitting, and they turn the reef white as well. So a lot of people make the mistake that coral bleaching is but it's not. It's a starfish. So you can't tell unless you're in the water, underneath the water, analysing it. None of these people were diving instructors. The people who own the boat, they're not diving instructors, and I love these people, they're my friends, but they don't go underwater. So they took Channel 9 out. Channel 9 had a diver with them, and then some U-boat marine biologist from overseas somewhere, and they come up out the water and said, "It's beautiful down there." But as soon as the cameras went on, "Oh yeah, well, we've got this climate change causing the bleaching." But they had not found one patch of bleaching, not one patch. And what was ridiculous, if they got me out on the boat, I could have showed them a patch. Only one patch though, because I know the whole area. You know what I mean? So I think it's important, just be factual here, be honest, and that's it. And the more honest we can be, the better the world will be.
And I like what you said as well about the fear in the word bleaching. It's a terrifying word, isn't it? Bleaching, chemical-like damage. The coral is being bleached, and people go, "Oh, this is terrible." Someone chose that word quite carefully.
It's a lot more aggressive than
it is, isn't it?
Discoloration.
Yeah,
there's some discoloration in the reef. It's been bleached.
Absolutely. Cool. So I think it's coffee time.
Coffee time.
Yeah, quite a big subject, really, isn't it? Because it's a big
mate,
area.
we could go on forever on this one, couldn't we?
Yeah. I think, like you said, the proof is in the pudding, and the proof is in the fact that the diving industry isn't actually ringing any alarm bells. The guys with the boats are not saying, "We're going to have some problems here. There's going to be no coral left in 10 years' time, and it's time to sell my boat." Exactly.
Well, you know what? I say proof is in the pudding. If you want to come and see it, come and check us out. I'll take you out to the reef. I'll show you something which will blow your mind. The most beautiful thing you'll ever see in your life. So
there you go.
That's up to people to do that.
The challenge is there. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching.